This is the Porst Color Reflex 55mm, with a remarkable aperture of f1.2, at a very low price. This review is more about the cinematic use of this lens and less about the photo quality. The lens shown here is already modified and equipped with a focus gear. It is a barely known lens from the 70s and is therefore relatively cheap to get. On average, at the time of making this video, you would pay about €150 for it. The special feature of this lens is of course the aperture of f1.2. A certain amount of blurriness at such apertures is always to be expected. In daylight with the aperture completely open we achieve a very dreamy look. The bokeh is extremely blurry and highlights objects in focus very well. At the edges, however, there is some bleeding and chromatic aberration, which can be seen as characteristic and can be used as a deliberate effect, for example in dream sequences. The real advantage of this lens, however, is in low-light situations. These examples were shot only with available light at night. The whole sequence was shot in slow motion, which costs also quite a bit of light. The blending at the edges is not so obvious here. Typical for such vintage lenses is the characteristic onion bokeh, which is very pretty with many light sources. Details in the distance are still well recognizable, and the noise is also kept within limits. History. This lens was introduced to the German market by the Porst company in 1972. In the end it was a low-budget non-aim lens from Japan which was offered as a rebrand. It was therefore offered in different countries under different names such as Cosina and Yoshinon. Now the technical data. As usual with such vintage lenses, this is a completely manual lens. That has to be clear. The mount used here is the Mitake mount, which can easily be adapted to almost any modern mount. For example, I use it here on the EF mount of the Blackmagic. The lens is intended for full format, so note that there is an extension of the focal length on APS-C sensors. The aperture has fixed snap-in points. As usual with such vintage lenses, you can simply remove the small ball inside and thus declick the lens. The filter thread is 55mm. I use a step-up ring to 77mm to use my ND filters. The lens is made entirely of metal and weighs around 370 grams. Due to its size, the lens is not too heavy and can be used on a gimbal without any problems. In conclusion, despite the flaws, this lens is unbeatable for the price. Especially for low-light situations, you can't get such a fast lens for the price. In comparison, modern lenses cost more than 10 times as the price. Another tip: there is also a Porst 55mm with an aperture of 1.4, for which you only have to pay around €80. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the scene of vintage lenses. See you next time. Stay creative.